This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
What's good, folks, friends, family, frenemies, enemies, loved ones, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle-earth, to the 250th episode of Disguise Coverage. This one in particular, sponsored as always by One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Find it in the episode, find the online menu in the episode show notes. So they're here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. This episode of Disguise Coverage is also powered by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. I'm your host, Anthony. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. In this episode of Disguise Coverage, the only show and podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. We're going a little bit off the regularly scheduled program that we do in season. Instead of doing Bills versus Jets and having a guest on who does scheme and structure analysis for the Jets and talking about the matchups, I wanted to pivot a little bit, and as the episode is titled, Trouble in Paradise, ? What to make of the Buffalo Bills 3-2 start. I wanted to pivot a little bit and just kind of analyze where the Bills are after an interesting 5 games. I think a lot of fans were really into praising the Bills as, a juggernaut after their 3-0 start. And then we've seen a significant swing of the pendulum in the other direction after 2 disappointing losses in weeks 4 and 5 to the Baltimore Ravens and Houston Texans. So this episode is going to take a look at where the Bills currently sit, what to make of this 3-2 start, where the fires are, the difference between what a fire is versus what smoke, looking at both sides of the ball, looking at where the Bills need to course correct some things, where they need to pivot and really to kind of move forward from here and correct some of the issues that we're seeing. But what's the difference between an actual issue versus fodder and all that kind of stuff? And to do that in this episode, I am very excited to be joined by one of my favorite people who he doesn't have all the time in the world anymore. You may have seen him on TV in a variety of settings and forms. He's known on TV as Next Gen Ken, which is one of the coolest nicknames ever. I am joined by Mr. Kendall Mirsky, friend of the show and friend of mine in real life. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here. And also happy to be here on this milestone of occasions. I'm going to need you to hit up why this is so significant before we get going.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I actually had no idea.
Kind of fate that I end up back on it. On this.
And what's funny is I literally forgot about it again until right when we went live. My wife mentioned it to me yesterday or this morning, and she was like, "Oh, like isn't your 250th episode coming up?" And I was like, how do you even know that? And she was like, "Oh, like if you look up the show playlist, it tells you how many episodes there are." Right. I was like, "Oh," and so yesterday it said 249. So she's like, "Oh, today is your 250th," and I was like, "Oh, that's super cool." And so she mentioned it to me multiple points throughout the day. Also got me a cool little cake thing to celebrate, which was really awesome. And then I completely forgot about it until right before we went live, even though I have it written down in a multitude of spots. Yeah, so it's cool to, have the longevity and sustainability, I guess, and have the success that I've achieved here with the brand and on the show. But I think it's even better that you are here for the 250th. And it's it is really kind of destiny and fate and the stars aligning a little bit, especially with how this week went out. You having the time. No, it's just, I wish I had planned it, but now I kind of like it even more.
No, it's better that it's not planned.
Yeah, it is. So this is super awesome. And I wouldn't want to have anyone else join me for the 250th. So
thanks,
I'm pumped.
Man.
Thank you for being here. And for taking the time. You are crushing it with the day job work that I think everybody kind of knows that you do now, but you are crushing it. And you've always done great work in whatever you've done with anything football related. So I'm very happy for the success that you are having out in front of the camera and behind the scenes. And tonight, I'm going to bring a little bit of that world into this conversation. Just Kendall, I kind of hit everybody with that intro. You obviously know why you're here and what we're going to talk about, but just high level before we really dive into the details and all the meat and potatoes of everything. Where's your head at with where the Bills are at 3-2 right now? Did you get how much of the high highs were you feeling after the 3-0? How much of the low lows are you feeling after the last 2 losses? Just where's your head at? What are your thoughts as the Bills sit here, after a nice, encouraging start and then kind of a disappointing previous 2 games?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I feel like a lot of this fan base probably knows me as the more realistic and pragmatic of Bills fans, and I try to stay level-headed. But
it's why I love you. It's why I love you.
But I'm not going to lie to you. I drank the Kool-Aid this year. I definitely got a little in over my head after those first 3 games. And I was like, wow, the changes they made this offseason, really leaned into everything that they were believing and trimming the fat of things they felt they didn't need to spend on and where they could get cheaper, and their coaching could lift those elements of the team that are cheaper
Mm,
or shift to different skill sets, and other skill sets will help complement those skills, like all of it just mixing and matching perfectly. After 3 games, I drank the Kool-Aid. I was totally in on it, and I was like, "Wow, this team really practiced what they preached all off season, this idea of everyone's gonna eat, next man up on defense, like,
mm.
everything just working out." And, yeah, we came back to earth, we got a little bit humbled, and I think now it's just time for me and the fan base to just recalibrate and remember where expectations were in the preseason, and
Okay.
getting to this point at 3-2 5 weeks in, like, sure, it's not ideal, especially knowing that you were 3-0, but like,
Yeah.
3-2 is really not a bad position, especially when you take the grand scheme of things and the big picture. Like, look at the AFC East right now. Like, the Bills are in a very good position in the AFC East, and the
Hmm.
key to the postseason is winning your division. If you win your division, you have a better path through the postseason, and you got to get to the dance to win the dance. So that's always kind of been my mantra. Is it's been so tough to make the dance in my life as a Bills fan.
Fair.
So, just got to get there, and got to get there in a good seed, and you give yourself a good opportunity to win. So all of these moments, all of these losses are just teachable moments. And I mean,
Hmm.
it sucks to lose the 2 games that we lost, especially the way that it happened. It's definitely very humbling. But I like to think the team got better because of it.
That's fair. And I'm annoyed with the losses from for the most part of thinking like those are teams you're going to be battling with for seeding coming down the stretch. And
Yeah.
now you have two AFC losses. You also have the
Not to
tiebreaker loss to those
mention
teams.
the Bengals not helping us out in overtime against the Ravens.
See, you know what though? I hate Cincinnati, so I was cool with it. Like when
I mean,
Lamar
yeah,
fumbled
whatever
that
happened,
snap, yeah,
probably, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's
I
gonna be
took it. I
negative.
was like, yeah, that's fine. It's funny that mindset of like I still am very much okay. In order to win the dance, you got to get to the dance, but then also like when is that point of enough's enough where you get to like the Andy Reid at Philadelphia level or the Marty Schottenheimer level
Mhm,
everywhere he went, where it's like, okay, we're consistently winning the division. We're consistently like a Final Four team in the conference. You just can't get over that hump and
mhm.
kind of balancing the expectation and wanting to get a championship with like, it's hard to punch a ticket every year. There's not a lot of
Yeah,
teams that punch a ticket, let alone win their division consistently every year. And I think that expectation piece all around the expectation for what this team is and should be in general, but then especially coming into this year, I think the 3-0 start and the way that it happened kind of made everybody forget about,
yes.
the last time you were here, we were talking about it being a revamp. We weren't
Yep,
saying rebuild, but we were saying revamp. And we talked about the variables this year and the moving pieces and parts with players, the new schematics, all the new, the new pieces off the field from a coaching staff perspective, let alone on the field, and how those pieces kind of had to align. And I think that 3-0 start, as you alluded to a bit, as we talked about the last time you were here, kind of warped everybody in just thinking like,
that
no, it
expectation
yes,
completely shifts.
to the moon. Yeah. And it's just funny to see where we are now, where I like 2 weeks ago, I feel like Joe Brady was being worshipped as a golden god. And now there's
Mhm.
people calling for his head. There were people
I
calling for his
mean,
head last week because of the trick play, let
all it
alone
took
this
was
past week.
one bad trick play, and the guy needs to be fired. So,
Yeah. It's intense to kind of see that. And I guess so sitting here after those two losses, if there's something you are pointing to right now, and again, if this is part of one of your points later, feel free to be like, I'm going to kind of keep it in the holster. But if there what has stood out to you the most with these two losses? Is it one thing in particular? Is it something high level? Is it something super niche or detailed? Is it a coaching piece? Is it a player piece or a position grouping piece? Like, is there one thing where you're sitting here after these two losses and like the first thing that comes to your mind and you're like, that's the thing on the dartboard that I'm pinning or pointing to?
I mean, it kind of goes with one of my 3 things that I want to point out, but it's such a broad thing. I don't really mind about,
Mhm.
showing it early. Is really this idea that the Bills really shifted their identity
Okay.
offensively this year, and it's so evident through the first 5 games, and even the way that we won the first 3 games. This team isn't built as well to play from behind as we've known it to be. And I
Mm,
think it's really evident. And I know we came back in week 1 against the Cardinals, but that's a team that has shown a lot of warts in the secondary. Like if there's a team you can play from behind against and that's not your strong suit, it's the Commanders, it's the
fair.
Cardinals. Like there are teams where you can do that and you can get away with that. Um but there are other was it's just not going to be the same. And I mean, it makes sense that the Ravens would be one of them, not even from a defensive
Well,
perspective, but they're going to take the air out of the ball and make
hmm
that game short. So um I think the biggest thing for me, and this trickles down to my other points that I want to get to, but overarching, and this is why I wanted to start with it, is just the idea of this offensive identity change and what it means, what we have to get used to as fans, and being more comfortable and feeling like in the driver's seat in the moments where you're up or
mm,
you're only down one score or like you're taking the air out of the football early in games, or how important a early start and a hot start is in games and getting in positive game script early, like all of these things. It's so important to this current identity of team
mm,
and the way Joe Brady is operating. Like we see the depth of target changing, we see all sorts of things changing with how this offense wants to attack defenses, and honestly how they're trying to manipulate defenses. So I think really just reshaping and recalibrating my mind, that's like the
mm.
biggest point to this. It's not necessarily, oh, hit the panic button, hit the panic button, this team
Yeah.
can't play from behind. It's more like, no, we didn't want to play from behind. That was never the thought, that this team was ever going to be behind. we're
Yeah.
we're playing in a world where we want to be ahead, we want to control the possession game, and we want to be efficient with our possessions. We're going to take care of
Yes.
the football. At worst, we're going to get 3 points on every possession, and that's been a goal of this team. And it's been somewhat good, but like there's some situational moments like third downs that have taken a
Yes.
step back. It's little things like that that have taken a step back. But that's probably like my biggest thing is just recalibrating and reshaping my expectations for the offense
Mm.
specifically.
I think that's very well said. One of the pieces that you mentioned, like if I'm answering this question, the biggest thing for me has just been how important game script is to
Yeah.
this team. And I knew it would be. Again, you were on the show multiple times throughout the offseason. We talked about the direction they were going. And I spent so much of this offseason breaking down film of the Texans and Lions and Rams and all these teams that go with bigger 11
Hmm.
or 12 personnel and
Or
mash you and get
condensed
condensed. Yep,
formations, or yeah,
reducing
whatever it
formational
is.
width, the play action game, and all of
Hmm.
this. And talking so much about how important the scheme and schematics were going to be for this offense to succeed because they didn't have a bunch of dudes that could go get you a bucket on the
Yeah.
offensive side of the ball. It was you got to scheme these guys open. Everybody's got to be on point with their landmark and their timing and the rhythm and all of it. And I I thought going into the Baltimore week that they presented a good foil for the Bills, especially with how the Bills are
Yeah.
banged like on both sides of the ball. If you're looking at
Yeah.
the Ravens offense is a good foil for a multitude of teams. But then the Bills defense, they're playing with all backups at the second level. The Ravens can go 12 and 13 personnel easily. They also have Pat Ricard, depending on if you're qualifying him as a fullback or a tight end, whatever have you. And then they have Lamar and they have Derrick Henry and just a unicorn brand of offense. Not to mention the motion and misdirection and everything that we saw. Like all of it worked. They hit on all cylinders. They took advantage of the Bills' upfield nature on the defensive line, fast flowing nature at the
Hmm.
linebacker spot, crushed them. But I kind of thought they could do that. Same thing on the other side of the ball. Like the Bills' offense is built. We can go like bigger 11 personnel and run and, pass the ball, condensed or spread. And we can do the same thing with our tight ends. Who can match us? And the Ravens are like, we can. We've got like Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith and Trenton Simpson, and we can go three safeties if we want. We've also got like a bunch of hybrid defensive linemen, and we can like game you up in a bunch of ways. So that game didn't like it was a bad loss, but that game and even some of the Texans game as well, even though the Bills made it close, those really put into perspective for me how important the game script is from a negative
Yeah.
perspective. And then going back to the Jacksonville game and Miami game, tying in how important the game script was positively in those games. And just if the Bills get into a spot where they have to live in a, known passing situation or a
Yep.
true drop back world, that's not a world they want to live in.
No.
We're seeing something similar to kind of what's happened to the Saints the past couple weeks. The first couple weeks, the Saints are basically running old school offense. It's 21 personnel, I formation. They're running the ball. They're going play action. They're taking more shots downfield than the Bills are, and they're connecting on them. But then all of a sudden, if they get behind the 8 ball or they get into known passing situations, then granted their own line got banged up the last couple of weeks, but it gets a little scary.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like you have favorable points where you want to attack defenses schematically and from a play script, game script perspective. And once that gets flipped on its head, you're no longer at a competitive advantage.
Yeah, and so much of this offense success is tied to being able to run the football, play action, run the football, play action, and then taking that same personnel grouping that you just ran the ball with or when condensed and just going spread next time and going empty or going 2-by-2 out of gun and attacking and keeping defenses on the back foot. And that game script piece really like hit me. When the Bills are out of that, it's scary. And that's like the overarching thing. It ties into some of my specific points, and I know some of yours as well, which we'll get into. But yeah, like just how important game script is. It makes me think back to the Colts defenses for a lot of the years in the Peyton Manning years. Their defense wasn't really good. The year they won the Super Bowl, they had the defensive player of the year, Bob Sanders, who just had a crazy good year. But yeah, Gary Brackett was like an okay linebacker, but their whole team was built around Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis at edge. And their design was like, hey, we have a great high-powered offense. We're going to try and get up like 21-0.
And then they're going to have to pass all game. And we're going to get
Dwight
after
Freeney and Mathis are just going to hunt. Like,
but that's the thing. That's why football is chess, because you're anticipating pushing a game script on your opponent and building your team to live positively in that game script. And if you're not cultivating that competitive advantage for yourself, you're just trying to build like a spread yourself too thin roster where you're like, oh, I'm just going to be solid everywhere. And then we'll be able to adapt to whatever happens. But then you have no one that can win their matchups because everyone's just really solid across the board. If you're manipulating things to try and create plus matchups in specific game script moments that suit you, you're ahead of the game. That's why it's the whole moniker, oh, chess, not checkers.
Yeah, man. That's one of my favorite lines from Training Day 2. Great movie. Yeah, it's just how important that script is, how hard it's hit them. We've really seen it. And then like, I feel like that's the umbrella. And then or maybe like that's the wheel, and then all the little spokes that are attached to it.
Yeah.
Are some of the things we'll get into tonight, or some of the specific things that the offense hasn't been able to hit on. I also think there's some defensive pieces. I have a couple defensive pieces I want to talk about tonight.
Good, because I don't.
Nice, fair, balance it out. Yeah, it's just a weird spot for them to be in, and I don't take like joy in it, but part of me like laughs at it, and even me naming this episode like Trouble in Paradise. Like I think it's so funny how everybody just those first three. We'll just use the offense for example. Joe Brady was like a golden god the first 3 weeks, especially after that Jacksonville game. Like he's hitting on everything. Everybody's making Ken Dorsey jokes. People are talking about Allen for MVP. The conversation is already like, how much money do we have to pay Joe Brady to get him to stay? Or who's going to be the next OC? Because he's definitely going to get a head coaching job. And then within a week, people want this man's head on a pike. And then within another week, it's even worse. Like, it's just, getting like intense. And it makes me like, I went back and forth between titling this episode Trouble in Paradise or Paradise Lost, but I couldn't make Paradise Lost fit nice on the graphic. So I went with this. And yeah, it's just made me, it's the only thing that's kind of like giving me a chuckle besides being disappointed in the losses as they kind of falter a little bit. But we're going to dive into those pieces. I want to go back and pull this comment from Roy because I really appreciate it. Roy says, I see the tree as the Halloween vibe going. Absolutely.
Yeah, it does.
Got some black garland with some little spooky white ghosts that are attached to it. And then we've got some jack-o'-lantern lights that are also wrapped around there. You can also see a little jack-o'-lantern up there, a little pumpkin down there. Also got an adorable little cat with a pumpkin and a purple witch hat up there. So we're rocking the Halloween vibes. I might change the garland as we get closer to Halloween, but I'm really digging it. Roy, you always notice the tree, and I greatly appreciate for that. And my wife will also greatly appreciate that because of, she's kind of the producer behind the scenes and helping me to keep up with the tree and the decor. Kendall, anything else high level on your mind before we kind of dive right into it?
No, that's the main thing. Game
Beautiful.
script, baby.
Beautiful. I'm in lockstep with you. All right. So for those of you playing at home, as we dive into this, everybody watching, again, listening, whatever have you, playing at home, Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, feel free to put them up into the chat. If you have specific things that you are looking at right now, put it into the chat. If there is something you think isn't a big deal, if you think something is a huge priority and is a huge problem, let us know what you think the fires are that need to be put out, how you think they should be fixed, or if something is being talked about as a fire, but it's really just smoke. Whatever you got, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, put it up into the chat. If you think our answers are stupid, feel free to comment how stupid and dumb we are. As always, super chats get priority. One, because I respect the monetary donation. Two, the color distracts me from my notes and pulls me forward, but doesn't have to be super chat for you to get your comment pulled up. Kendall, you are the guest. Feel free to hold on. I got to answer this too. Roy says, how long does she make you wait to put up the big tree? So the big tree that goes over there, and then we take the little one and put it there. That happens in November, because then we just go full, like, middle-ish November. Then we go full Christmas with the little guy over there and the big one over there. It goes up at the same time as, like, the Christmas tree in the living room, and then her and I fight to try and keep the Christmas tree in the living room up for as long as we can. I've had it up until the end of March before. I was super proud for that one. But usually it goes down like end of January, sometime in February.
Oh my God.
I'm a fan of it.
You and my girlfriend would get along.
I just think it should be up all year round. That's the reason this tree is here, because we didn't do it in the living room. That was my idea. I was like, you keep the tree up all year round, and you just change the lights and garland every month. In February, bunch of red and hearts. It's a Valentine's Day tree. In March, a bunch of green and shamrocks. It's a St. Patrick's Day tree.
It's a vessel for decorations all year.
Easter, it's a bunch of pastel and egg ornaments. It's an Easter tree, and you just keep rolling and rolling.
I don't mind the mini one. The big one, oof.
That's what her, like, she did that. I lost the fight with that, and she's like, I'll get you the little one to put in the show. And I was like, okay, compromise. And that's what,
there you go.
That's what marriage is.
That's love.
What marriage is. That's love in a nutshell, if you need one example. All right, Kendall, floor is yours. Feel free to start with whatever, wherever, whatever you got in terms of what to make of this Buffalo Bills 3-2 start, a fire you want to talk about, something that you think is smoke, where your eyes are focused, whatever you got.
Yeah, so I think I really want to start with the passing game, and like you said, this was a really good metaphor. Is the idea that the game script thing is just the start, and it kind of trickles down into all of these other things. I want to go into the passing game specifically, and what has happened with this offense on specific target locations. So I already told you about this, but I wanted to look into how the Bills are success-wise on targets that are outside the numbers, left or right, doesn't matter, versus inside the numbers. Just holistically, how it looks. And what I came away with was they're pretty inefficient on both sides of the numbers, but it is markedly better inside the numbers, and specifically with success rate. So their success rate increases 21% when they're passing inside the numbers versus outside the numbers, and their rank jumps 19 spots, so it's 10th inside
also, real
the
quick,
numbers.
I'm going to pull that up on the
sheet.
Yeah, because you got the slide right there. There you go.
So yeah, you can see it jumps from 29th to 10th in success rate. And the reason I like success rate for this specifically is because I feel like these two, CPOE and success rate, is really perfect for the way Joe Brady's trying to orchestrate this offense, and everything is just really about like matriculating down the field and being ahead of schedule. And that's like everything with success rate. Success rate is about, on first down, are you getting 40%? On second down, are you getting 50%? And then on third down and fourth down, are you converting?
First. Yeah.
So like that is specifically a stat that tells you if you're ahead of schedule or if you're behind schedule. So I really like to show this disparity between what's going on with the Bills passing game when they're targeting their receivers outside the numbers versus inside the numbers. And you can see there's just a massive difference. And we know who the Bills are typically targeting inside the numbers. It's Khalil Shakir and it's Dalton Kincaid. And those are obviously their top two pass catching weapons. And maybe even the handful of James Cook catches. Those are inside the numbers for the most part. Yeah. So all of that stuff is keeping the chains moving. It's keeping them ahead of schedule. And obviously the same, it's inversely the conversation when we're talking outside the numbers. But then even when you go to CPOE, the reason I wanted to talk about CPOE is because it's completion percentage over expectation. That's just the acronym, CPOE. And not just completion percentage. I wanted to use over expectation because not every completion is created equal, and based on what likelihood that catch has to be made, the Bills are still under the expectation, no matter where it is. But you can still see it's slightly better when we're talking inside the numbers versus outside the numbers. So that's kind of the main thing, just in terms of, or I shouldn't say the main thing, but like the thing my brain clung on to when I was like, oh, what's going on with this Bills offense? Something I kind of want to look into. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. They're staying more on schedule when this happens. And then I wanted to dive deeper into it. And then I decided to look at by target alignment. So that's pretty much same idea, but it's not where they're targeted when the ball is at their hands. It's where they started, where they aligned pre-snap. So very similar situation. Success rate is like almost the same numbers, but you can see the rank disparity is crazy there. And then even the passer rating, most of that is obviously Josh Allen with the hand, like 3 attempts from Trubisky.
Fair. Yeah.
But with passer rating, so much of this is influenced by Khalil Shakir only having one ball. I don't even want to call it dropped, but he hasn't caught one of his targets this season.
Oh,
so
I tweeted something out a couple going into the Baltimore game. Like his numbers in the slot, I think he was like 10 catches on 10 targets. His EPA was like over 1. Like
because
he was crushing it.
He hadn't not caught a pass that was targeted to him in so long, like dating back to last season at some point.
Dating back to like Boise State.
So like all of these, like the completion percentage stuff, and then even the yards per attempt gets inflated because when you're not dropping an attempt, that inflates those numbers. Like Khalil Shakir means so much to this offense, and we didn't even really know it until this past week, not having him, and just showing how much he keeps this offense on schedule and how reliable he is to Josh Allen. So I think this is a big, long-winded way, me showing you guys the numbers, the disparities between wide, slot, outside the numbers, inside the numbers for these high-level metrics. It's really just a long way of saying, like, we have to establish something on the perimeter. It has to be established at some point this year. It doesn't need to be a strength. It just needs to be established, because that's kind of even going back to the first point that we were talking about. This team identified its identity early. It realized what it wanted to be and where it's going to be efficient and win big. And it wasn't going to be winning on the perimeter, but there needs to be a semblance of that to work to threaten defenses and make sure that they respect those things, so they don't clamp down and collapse on the middle of the field, collapse on the slot, like all of these parts of the offense. We're going to see defenses start to allocate things to the middle of the field, or specific alignments, specific players, like all of that stuff. It's going to change because of who's getting the attention from the Bills offense and who isn't getting the opportunities.
And so I love this for a multitude of reasons. One, just I still like the success rate is a crazy difference. Like you go from 35.4% out wide, which is 31st, to 52.9% from the slot, which is 8th. Like that's crazy. Also, it's still, I mean, we'll see what would have happened, or we would have seen what have happened. I'm still really disappointed we didn't get a full game of like both these offenses in Houston at their full tilt. Like I wanted to see full tilt Nico Collins in that offense and Shakir and like the whole group, but we just I feel so robbed of that. But I think that's a great point, like with where this offense is operating and where it's not. And I think that also ties into some of the coverage pieces that we're seeing. Now, you and I talked about it in text. I know I have it in a slide that I'll be bringing it up with one of my points. This also furthers what we're seeing, right? So the Bills, and I tweeted it earlier, like, because it's just so on brand. Like the Bills built this offense to combat defenses in the modern NFL landscape and like fight too high defenses and take them out of those too high looks.
Yep.
And the defenses were like, okay, we're going to go single high. And then the Bills offense is like, oh crap. Like, what do we do now?
Don't.
Can you go back to too high, please? And thank you. And because the Bills aren't threatening teams out wide and on the outside, defenses aren't threatened of being beaten vertically or losing in one-on-one matchups on the outside. So they're free to play cover 1, which is man coverage with a post safety. They're free to play cover 3, which even though it's a deep third zone, it can still function like one-on-one coverage, and you still have a post safety. That also allows you to walk a safety down into the box to, 1, try and stop the Bills' run game, which is where everything starts for them. But then 2, also clog the interior of the field, and you can kind of naturally, without even have to doing it schematically, you can naturally bracket Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir and kind of just do it by flooding bodies into the box, because you can roll with these coverages where you have a safety down near the line of scrimmage. And now all of a sudden, this strength that the Bills have, you can mitigate it a bit, and you force them to go outside and force Allen to look outside the numbers. And he doesn't have the horses out there who can separate or win. And it becomes this like snake or dragon chasing its tail type of thing, where you're just going round and round, spinning your tires in the mud. And it all stems from like this one issue of where you can or can't get the ball to, spatially, because of the guys you have that you're running with.
So I'm curious. I think I have this remembered correctly chronologically, but do you remember the dig to Kincaid in the middle of the field? He caught it, I believe, in between the hashes, running from the left side of the field to the right side of the field. It's probably like a 20-ish yard
Against
completion.
Baltimore?
No, against the Texans.
Okay, yeah, that was, I didn't know which one you meant. Yep.
Late in the game. And it was probably, in my opinion, the best in rhythm completion of the game. And I mean, that's not saying much considering Josh had 9 completions, but that came after the Coleman touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. So like there are little things that have to be established for the defense to feel like they need to spread it out and cover the entire width of the field. And then it opens up things in between the second and third level, which is where we saw that dig to Kincaid get completed. And then he had a 10-yard run after the catch. So like we need things to establish themselves to open up certain parts of this offense, because it's not like this offense can't do it.
No.
But there are certain things that I think Joe Brady is, I don't want to even say like he's being stubborn, because I think so far through 5 games, he's actually shown a lot of fluidity and flexibility.
Yeah.
But there are parts that I think he needs to tweak back a little bit, where it's like, yes, this can be the identity, but don't over push your agenda. There are still things you can dial back a hair and lean back on the 2023 version of the Bills and still balance it a little, but maybe more in favor of what your identity wants to be.
Fair. And even again, that game against the Texans, my biggest gripe, and you and I were texting about it on Sunday, my biggest thing was like, the run was working. Give me more play action, especially on those drives. I started counting. I was at, I tweeted and I told you this too. Like I was at a party, so I couldn't really like watch it how I normally do. But I started like kind of mentally charting in the second half, and the Bills would have these first down runs where they would run for they would literally run for a first down and get a new set of downs. And then they'd come back and run it again. And it happened like 3 drives in a row. And I kept being like, on that next new first down, play action. Like,
I remember like the Ty Johnson wide zone to the left, and then that was like a 10, 12-yard run. And then the very next play, flip it, same play. And it's like, we don't have to just spam the same play. Like, it worked. Show the same look and then play action off that look.
Yes.
That'll be much more beneficial than just banging your head against it until they show you can stop it, because at some point they will.
And I feel like he was trying to get into like the Dallas script again of like, hey, we just ran dart every single play and it worked. Right. Let's do this now. And it's like, but
it's not always going to work like that.
No. And especially with how much this offense needs explosives, like play action is going to be the way to get it, because you're not with this wide receiver core. And again, this isn't like, I mean, it's not ideal, but this is expected. Like, you're not going spread with this wide receiver grouping and just slinging it all over. You're not running an air raid like Mike Leach, Colt Brennan, like Hawaii offense where you're slinging it everywhere. Like, that's not how they're built. So you need that play action element. You need bootlegs and rollouts and all that stuff. And so your point there ties into like my first one, which is just the overall like lack of verticality in the offense and separation deep. And I put this tweet out earlier in the week, and I still think it's nuts. Josh Allen has 18 deep passing attempts on the year. Those are quantified as passes of 20 or more air yards. So again, 18 of those through week 5. That is tied for the 4th most. His ranking on those passes amongst 32 qualifying QBs. So he's 3 of 18 for a 16.7 completion rate. That is 31st out of 32. There's 2 drops in there. One to Keon Coleman against Baltimore up the sideline, and the one to James Cook on the wheel route through the B gap against the Jags. So there's 2 drops. So it could have been 5 of 18. Still not great, but wanted to put that in there. He has a negative 11.4 completion rate over expected, which is 30th out of 32. His targets average 1.4 yards of separation, which is 27th. He has a 50% tight window throw percentage. That is the 6th highest. Tight window throws are the percentage of passes where the targeted receiver has less than 1 yard of separation when the pass arrives. He has a negative 0.05 EPA per dropback, which is 25th, a negative 0.9 EPA, which is 26th, a 53.2 passer rating, which is 28th, a 50% pressure rate, which is the 9th highest, and a 3.79 seconds time to throw, which is the 5th highest. They're not connecting on the deep ball. They're not forcing teams to respect the threat of anything vertical, whether in one-on-one situations or with two high safeties over the top. And then that ties into your point of the outside and the inside and the intermediate and the second and third level, because everything just starts to get tight and it just starts to get constricted because they know you can't really succeed outside, let alone deep. We're going to clog the underneath. We're going to clog the intermediate. This is why we're seeing the coverages we're seeing, i.e. more single high coverages, because defenses don't fear getting into one-on-ones with the Bills or getting beat deep. And then the Bills run game is also faltering by extension because you're seeing more dudes in the box. The Bills run game, which was a good run game last year and still can be and still is in large respects this year, for running back runs only, they're 23rd in EPA per rush at a negative 0.08. They're 21st in running back rush success rate at only 39.6%. And they also have the 4th highest stuff percentage at 23.6%. For those who don't know, stuff percentage is carries which result in 0 or fewer yards. Like everything is just starting to get tight. Like each week is like tighter and tighter and tighter.
Because we're just showing more and more film of why you should collapse.
Yeah. And it's that to me is like the biggest issue. And I don't think you solve it by like you don't have the
there's
verticality
no one
in
thing.
this offense.
There's no one thing to solve it. That's why I said something and you said something. We're trying to achieve the same goal. Like I talked about wide alignment players and outside the numbers and stretching the field horizontally. And now you're talking about vertically and eye candy in the backfield. Like you're talking, all of this is to achieve the same goal.
Yes. And I don't see it getting better from like a player standpoint. Like they only have one true vertical speed element in this offense, which is MVS. I know some people might say Curtis Samuel. I personally have never thought that he plays to that 4.3 time 40 speed. And throughout the heavy majority of his career, he's never really been like a field stretching vertical element. He's really been an underneath, like, I'll catch a drag route and kind of take it up the sideline, do some stuff with it type of dude. That's where you see his speed. He's not really a burner, not this real vertical guy. Plus, he also has an injury history. Plus, he's currently injured right now. We know he's playing through that toe injury. I think that's limiting him. But even if it was just those two, that's kind of it. And MVS is very much a one-trick pony who's not seeing a ton of snaps. So when he's on the field, it's basically like, okay, this dude's probably going to go deep. And even within that, you don't have this combination of speed and route running, guys who can get you a bucket and win. So the way to generate explosives are going to have to be through the play action game, which works better when you have a good run game. You always have to mention it. Yes, you don't need a good run game to have good play action, but it definitely friggin' helps, as we say all the time. And I think that that's such the key piece that I'm worried about. And I don't necessarily know if it will get fixed because with that deep ball, we're seeing so many things fail, right? Like there isn't a lot of separation for Allen's guys deep. Allen, when he is getting guys, he's missing them. He had MVS in week 1 against Arizona on that post against going from left to right. He missed him. He had Mac Hollins on the double move against the Houston Texans. He missed him. And then you're getting some drops here and there. So it's a combination of like not getting separation. It's a combination of Allen missing some things. You do have some drops. And then partially the biggest thing too, you need, when you go deep, those routes usually take a little bit longer to develop. Yeah. So you need to hold up in pass protection. And we're not seeing that further and further we go for Josh Allen in the offense. Even just pressure by week, going from week 1 through 5 versus Arizona, 20%. Miami, 30%. Jacksonville, 23.5. Versus Baltimore, 44.1. Versus the Texans, 45.7. So it's also hard to go deep when your offensive line can't hold up. They're losing individual battles. They're getting gamed up in terms of protection and scheme. Like it's all these things. It's not one And I understand people want to be like, well, it's because the receivers suck or because they're not fast or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's some of that is partially true.
It's just more nuanced. Like
Yes.
there's layers to it.
It's a multitude of it. Like it's Brady not scheming guys great. He's just trying to run rub routes every single time to get somebody free deep. And that's hard. That's a hard way to live. It's all of this. And that's what scares me the most and why it's my first thing, because I do think it's a fire and I don't know how it gets put out because so much of it is scheme dependent instead of just being like, well, we can fix it with these kind of guys. Like that's not going to happen. I don't think.
I mean, I honestly, I think some of it does layer back to it. It's smoky and it's a fire that's gonna keep going if
It's
we
smoky.
can't if we can't get into positive game script. Like
Yes.
like
So
you,
that's the thing. Like
it
you
goes
have to
back
stick.
to point one. It
Yes.
goes back to point one in this idea of like establishing the run, making your play action more effective, being ahead so they are afraid of the run and they have to respect it the whole time. Like all of that, it layers together. And I don't, yeah, like singularly in a true drop back situation, I agree. It's a fire. Like it's just not, it's not something that's going to get fixed unless there are wholesale differences schematically. But something that I loved in those stats that you dropped, what was the time to throw on those deep ones? Did you say
Oh,
3.79?
yes, overall through the 5 weeks. His overall time to throw is also going up in each week. So so
Right.
just on those deep throws, so 20 or more air yards, he's averaging 3.79 seconds time to
Right.
throw, which is 5th highest.
So this is my point. The fact that that's 5th highest, but not only that, just the number alone, 3.79, that tells me we're not scheming up long passes. That tells me we're going for long pass attempts outside of structure.
Oh, off script. Yeah. Well, I mean, he's 3 of 18 on those throws of 20 or more air yards. The 3 completions are the back shoulder contested catch to Keon Coleman against Arizona, the off script scramble throw to Ty Johnson against Miami, and then the off script scramble throw to Khalil Shakir against the Baltimore Ravens.
Right. So one of those 3 was on schedule.
Correct.
Which is problematic. And that's
even the on schedule one, it's a back shoulder contested
catch. That's not a
catch.
scheme. That's not a scheme thing. That's just players winning their matchups.
Yeah,
and that's not to say that Keon Coleman can't continue doing that.
But that's a hard way to live.
But George Pickens made a living off of that his first year. Like that's the thing. Like there's a world where we could lean more into that. It's not to say that it's sustainable or it's something that's even going to help his development long term.
Yeah.
But it is something that we can go back to that well until we feel like it dries up. And to be honest, the fact that we didn't see it at all this week was a little problematic. I understand, like, look, we saw glimpses of it. Oh, we're playing Derek Stingley Jr. this week. Like, there are reasons to not go for those type of things. But if we're seeing that as a skill set, a plus trait in his skill set, and something that the offense desperately needs to establish, let's establish it a little bit. Doesn't need to like really dive yourself into the well, but let's stick our foot in there.
Yeah, and that's an area that just worries me so much. And then if you like, the more you can't threaten vertically, the play action will start to get a little tough because teams are going to run blitz you, and those run blitzes turn into pass rush free runners and blitzes when you're going play action. But then you also kind of need the play action to slow down the pass rush, which is part of what, I wanted in this game against Houston. They struggle to stop the run. They have Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson on the outside, who are each top 5 in terms of total pressures and pressure rate going into this game. Granted, they had a huge game against Chicago and Caleb Williams, but like, I wanted to slow down that pass rush. I wanted them to have to play run to pass, and your run game was working. So you go play action, they have to stop a little bit and then continue on to the quarterback. I also wanted to see more boots and some pieces, which is going to tie into one of my points later. Yeah, and it just, so much of it stems from the game scripting. That's the overarching point, I think, in a lot of this conversation for you and I, like we talked about. But yeah, that verticality element, and then tying into your point of like outside, it's just, it's worrisome. I feel like outside the numbers to like, I feel like you need, like when you do those like passing charts and there's like the shaded areas versus the light areas, I feel like you need to black out or shade everything outside the numbers and above 20 yards.
Yeah.
And then everything else the Bills can live in. That's hard. And defenses
Yeah.
know that, which is why they're seeing more cover one, why they're seeing more cover three, why it's going to continue, because defenses are like, we're just going to throw more bodies from the line of scrimmage up to about 15 or 16 yards and in between the numbers and in between the hashes.
The ironic thing is that you usually see stuff like this from an offense because you're limited from an arm talent perspective. Like we have
Yes.
like a Bo
So
Nix
wild.
situation where you can't throw the ball past 5 yards down the field, and it's. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say it's a Bo Nix problem, but I'm just saying, like, for an example, Bo Nix is someone with a low average depth of target, so he's easy to pick on for this situation.
Yes.
But like, we see that more commonly be the problem than horses in the stable from a pass catcher perspective
Yeah.
being the reason that you're holding us back. Like, we know Josh Allen can make every throw, but it's not like that. You talked about the tight window rate. This is the highest tight window rate the Bills have seen since 2020. Like,
Crazy.
it's tighter and tighter.
It's tough.
Defenses are collapsing down. There's less separation. We kind of knew that was going to be coming,
Yeah.
but
And then Allen's
still.
like, even going back to last year, Allen wasn't good on the deep ball last year. He was over.
Mhm.
I know everybody wants to point out that Diggs dropped that one against Kansas City, but think back to how much he overthrew Diggs in the first New England game. He underthrew Diggs against Jacksonville. He underthrew him again against Jacksonville in London. Like both those times there. He hasn't been consistent on the deep ball the past couple of years. And I think slowly it started to creep in a little bit and hurt them enough. But this year it's just been bad. And then
Yeah.
when you're pairing it with also not being a threat outside, because that's at least what Diggs gave you last year, right? Like,
Yep.
okay, this offense isn't winning vertically all the time. Allen's missing some stuff. They don't have a ton of speed. Okay. Diggs can still get you a bucket on the outside against dudes. Teams are still rolling coverage over his way or bracketing him and trying to put that into perspective. And now that guy's gone and that area of the field is closed off a little bit, my biggest concern is like, as we keep going forward, everything starts to just kind of negatively snowball where the run game gets harder and tighter
Yes.
and the pass game gets harder and tighter and the windows get harder and tighter. And it's just like,
Yep.
you need something to alleviate that pressure. And
Gotta establish something. You have to establish something to tell defenses they can't keep cheating like that.
that's right. That's right. Stop cheating. This is a fun conversation. This kind of made me sad a little bit though and worried. What's the kind of and next piece that you have? Actually, before we do that real quick, I want to bring up. Actually, no, continue. Go with your second point.
You sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
I gotta find it. All right. So I'm gonna go with shotgun and 11 personnel running.
I pulled it up. It's a slide. It's up.
So it's weird because I don't want to sit here and be like, yeah, the Bills need to like go back to what they did before Joe Brady, and they need to go back and be this type of offense, because that's not really what it is. I just kind of want to show the disparity in what we're seeing from a tendency perspective when we're in shotgun. How much are we running the football? And then when we're running the football, how efficient is it? And you can just see over the last 2 seasons, obviously a big dip in rush rate. That's, what is that, 23 and percent change in rush rate. And then we're losing a yard per carry. And the rank change in yards per carry out of shotgun is just glaring. And then the same goes for 11 personnel, where you can see we're top 10 in both areas last year, and now we're bottom half of the league, really second worst in the league in yards per carry. So this isn't to say the Bills need to shift. This is more just a conversation on tendencies and showing something else to defenses, because this stems off of the conversation we just had. We as an offense need to show defenses something different. We've put something on film for 3 weeks of the season as to why they should defend us one way, and defenses started to defend us that way, and it worked for those defenses 2 straight weeks. Now we need to show them something else and catch them off guard in week one, and then adjust to how defenses pivot to us in week 7, 8, 9. Because right now it's pretty predictable. Like, when we get in shotgun, it's usually a pass. When we get in 11 personnel, it's usually a pass. And even when it's not, and it is a run, it's not very effective. So something needs to give there. Obviously, the Bills have been very efficient passing out of heavy looks. I want to see the inverse now. I want to see them prove and show that they can do the inverse of run out of lighter looks. Something that you talk about with like the Rams getting more condensed, even though they're in 11 personnel. And honestly, this doesn't even need to be an 11 personnel conversation. Let's go back to shotgun and say, all right, we're in shotgun right now, and Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid are on the field, but Kincaid is split out wide. Kincaid is in the slot, and wherever Kincaid is, he's not in line, and Knox is. Whatever. We don't have
Yeah.
Alec Anderson on the field, and we're successfully running the football. Like,
Yeah.
we need to show more of that to defenses, because right now it's too much of a tendency giveaway, and even when it's not effective. So that's just somewhere else that my brain went from a research perspective, and just kind of looking at how this offensive identity has shifted, but maybe it's shifted a little too far. Let's bring it just a little back, but still keep the identity itself, because I do like the things that Joe Brady has installed, but I just don't want it to get overemphasized.
And I feel like that's a point that, I mean, I even clamored for it as well. I was like, give me more under center.
Yep.
Give me more.
That.
Yep. Give me more under center passing, under center play action. Or, hey, let's marry. I'm going to say this every year until it friggin' happens. We've seen a little bit this year. Let's marry the two and go pistol. Yeah. Give me some pistol, please, and thank you one time. But yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think so much of like Allen's comfortability in the shotgun and how he's operating and how that ties into him as a passer. You want to lean into the under center game and all that comes with that world in the run and the pass, and then being able to marry the two with play action. But it's that line balancing, or line dancing, I should say, of, well, how much do we incorporate it versus like sticking with what we know works for our guy already? Like, in that you kind of get caught in that in between of trying to find the right rhythm.
How many shotgun darts plays have we seen this year? Like,
oh man, bro, good call. I don't know.
It's like, I truthfully
don't think
can't picture one in my head. And that is crazy. We've seen a lot of dart
in general. Like, I really think, let me pull their, yeah, I mean, even just on the year, according to SIS before weeks 1 through 4, the Bills only had a 30% gap run rate on the year, which was 18th. And that includes duo and dart, with their stables. Most of their runs this year have been more zone-based, which is understandable to a degree if you want to tap into like the Shanahan and McVay world of condensed formations. You pair the zone run with boots and play action. But they're not having a ton of boots and play action. They only have a 10.8 play action rate, which is 28th, and a 4.5% boot rate, which is 29th. Granted, both of those are influenced heavily by the Baltimore game script, where they had to just straight true drop back it for the majority of the game. And then the Dolphins game script and the Jags game script, where like they were just out in front and it was like, okay, let's just do basic runs because we can. But I feel like more of the runs this year have been that mid zone run or even some outside zone. And I feel like we've seen less duo, less dart. They'll work it in here and there, or we'll get some semblance of it. Like we'll get the zone run and maybe we'll get a fold block from Spencer Brown or from Connor McGovern. So you might think like, oh, are they pulling someone and it's gap? It's like, no, it's still zone. The angle is just presenting itself. So it's a fold block. They've become more of a zone run team this year. Where last year they were last year it was 54% zone to 46% gap. And they were like a top 4% gap run rate team, which was tremendous. They had really good balance. This year they've shifted to more zone, which I think is somewhat expected, but I think it limits one of their best run game pieces, especially if you are struggling. If you go shotgun and you go spread, if they go 6 in the box against you, cool. You run dart. You have Josh Allen's athleticism to hold that defensive end. He makes you even though you have 5 blockers to 6 in the box, Allen is going to account for that backside edge defender. So it's still going to be a 5-on-5. Or if that edge crashes and makes it 6-on-5, you have Allen keep it. And you turn it into modern day triple option, or you have them just have it be a read element, whatever you want to call it, or have an RPO or a pass tag on the run, however you want to verbalize it. That element presents itself. And if defenses are scared of that and they want to crowd the box a little bit, then you do what you saw early on a ton against Jacksonville, which was like, oh, I only got like 2-on-2 out there and we're to the wide side of the field, I'm just spit it out to Shakir real quick because he has the angle to get a quick 6 yards or a quick 7 yards. And now you're just playing the numbers, angles, and space game.
Extension of run game.
Yes. And you need at this point, especially going forward, and as more tape becomes available on the Bills and more teams get to study it and use it, you need more and more easy buttons. You need more free yards. You need a quick 6-yard hitter right here. And even if it's not the sexy explosive that we'd like, you need everything you can. And I like that shotgun run piece. I think that's nice.
Yeah, it's just something else to present more to defenses. Because at this point, I think we're just seeing their tape catch up with them. And that's just kind of where my brain is going with it. They put great tape out there the first 3 weeks, but it's not like they showed anything different. Because they didn't have to change. They didn't have to. It was working. There was no reason to change. But we've hit a point where we need to start establishing different tendencies so we can start seeing how defenses are going to change.
Absolutely. I think that's very well said. Very, 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 very well said. Kendall, I want to bring up a quick piece. There's a little piece that I want to talk about going into the Jets game, which obviously is this upcoming Monday Night Football. Wanted to let me add to my stage and screen here from, courtesy of our folks here at BetUS. Kendall, want to get your thoughts here as we sit here. Jets fired their head coach today. Robert Saleh is no more in New York, which is pretty wild. So we'll see how much this changes as we go forward, but pretty tight spread here. The Bills go into New York. They're favored at 1.5. The over-under is set at 41. What are your thoughts here? Kind of taking a peek at this graphic. Are you leaning Bills? What do you think of the over-under? How do you feel about this spread, knowing where the Bills and Jets are right now?
I think right now the scariest thing in my mind is, truthfully, that Jeff Ulbrich is the interim head coach.
Scary in a good way? Like you're like scary like bad or scary good?
Scary bad.
Okay.
For the Bills, because I feel like Jeff Ulbrich just has it for Josh Allen. And I know Josh has played a very clean year for the most part, but like his dirtiest games are against the Jets and Jeff Ulbrich.
Always,
so
for the most part, always.
I don't know why. I just have this weird feeling like Jeff Ulbrich's just full week is going to be, you know what? I got a number on this number 17 guy. I'm just going to put him in hell for 60 minutes. That's kind of like the scariest thing for me, but yeah, pretty crazy. Not always seeing the away team get the favor.
I'm nervous, just like
crazy on that.
I don't know. I never know how much like the head coach change is going to like stimulate a team or like push them further. Like,
100%. There's data out there that it really does galvanize a team.
Yes.
But there's been a lot of, like, the Raiders are the easiest example from last year. It's recency bias, but this one is a really tough one to put your finger on because it came out of nowhere, and no one really knows how it started. No one really knows who stemmed it. Like, I mean, I sent you a meme today that like Aaron Rodgers was the reason he was fired, and I mean, I know nothing. I'm just connecting dots. But
there's a lot of smoke to those
that's what
stories and the fire there of like it being Rodgers' call, or like Woody Johnson was upset because he's like a U.S. ambassador and was upset that they lost in London. There was something because like Robert Saleh had like a Lebanon flag on his coat or something. Or hoodies.
There's so many different things where it's like, is this going to unite the team? Like, did the team want this, or was the team blindsided by this? And did Woody Johnson do it, or did Aaron Rodgers do it? And was the team not fully? So like, I think we're all just in the dark on this, and we're just going to have to wait and see like how much this truly unites this team.
Yes.
But we all know like the Jets, this big market, like it's going to be tough for them to really put the blinders on and the headphones on to keep this noise out and focus on their task. So
I'm too scared to like pick the spread because at a 1.5, you're essentially picking who's going to win the game. And I'm far too superstitious to do that, but I would probably take the under just because of how the Jets offense is looking. I think the Bills defense can do enough. And then just historically, the Jets defense always play the Bills offense tough.
Exactly.
And then now they're just where the Bills offense is. It's hard for me to sit here and think like, yeah, they're going to put up like 25 plus on the Jets. Like right now, like if the Bills win this game, I feel like it's like 17-10 or like 20-13. It's going to be like an ugly win that no one's going to want to see on Monday Night Football. But
hey, a win's a win.
Yeah, a dub is a dub, and I will take it any which way, shape, and form it comes. Thank you very much to BetUS for that graphic. And BetUS, of course, sponsoring and powering this episode. If you are looking for a new sports book this football season, BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest payouts in the industry, 150% bonus on your first deposit, and then a 125% bonus on your next 2 deposits up to $2,000 with code YouTube150. That's code YouTube150. They give you fast and easy deposit and withdrawal processes. They give you 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year, live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business. They allow you to get 10% back on your net losses twice a year, and they also can give you your very own personal account manager. Go over to BetUS for all of your betting and sports book needs. Thank you very much to them for that. Man, that's the only kind of like focus I wanted to give to. Yeah, I'm just nervous already for like this game, just like the state of like where we are at this point. And I didn't think we were gonna like be there. Part of the reason I'm still nervous. This is a quick point. For me, this is my defensive one, which I know you were happy about because
I am. I'm curious what it is.
Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward. I tweeted something out about it earlier. I'm worried about the Bills' pressure rate defensively, just given their structure and how they are. They're 17th in pressure rate this year at 33%, which isn't terrible. Middle of the road. You'd like it to be higher, but okay, 33%. They are last in blitz rate at 15.7%, in case anybody was wondering. But when I broke it out by week, that's where it concerned me a little bit. So going by week, pressure rate against the Arizona Cardinals, 34.2%. That was 17th that week. Against Miami, 27.9%. That was 24th. Against Jacksonville, 30.8%. Which was 19th. Against the Ravens, 27.3, which was 23rd. And then against the Texans, 42.9% pressure rate, which was by far their highest of the year, and it ranked 5th. That kind of positively skewing the numbers a little bit. I worry, and we'll see, I guess, what it looks like going forward. Taron Johnson coming back, Matt Milano coming back in December, Ed Oliver, we'll see what his health looks like. Dwayne Carter flashed positively in this game against Houston. A lot of it for me was from a run standpoint, not so much a pass rush standpoint. But, and then we'll see Austin Johnson's health. There's Von Miller, all of these pieces. But that concerns me a bit on the defensive side of the ball, especially because, and I mentioned the blitz rate, we know Sean McDermott in his heart of hearts just wants to rush 4 and play coverage behind it. Even when the Bills blitz, it's usually like a simulated or a creeper, so you're still only rushing 4 and dropping 7. They're not going to be this team where all of a sudden, like, they dial it up and they've got like a 30 or higher percent like blitz rate and they're bringing 5 and 6 man pressures.
Really only against like rookies they'll do that.
Where they'll heat them up and try and like mug gaps and see what they're going to bring and who they're going to bring. And I wonder a little bit if that starts to bite them at some point, because they have one of the higher average target separations right now at this point defensively, which is super muddy. Like, I could do a whole topic of like why that's muddy, but considering how much they drop 7, that could be like that's in the back of my mind a little bit. But even just one thing, like to not get too off topic with that, like if it's 3rd and long and they're not covering the flats because they know they can rally and tackle, if the quarterback throws it to their running back in the flats for the check down and he's got like 8 yards of separation, but the Bills rally and tackle and stop him 5 yards short and they punt, that's a win. The Bills are planning for that. So that's why I don't like to use average target separation as necessarily the end all be all in terms of an overall stat versus like specific areas of the field. But I am a little concerned about the pressure piece, because even when they were healthy up front to start the year, it was still kind of middling. Like, again, you're looking from a week-to-week ranking, going 1 through 5, 17th, 24th, 19th, 23rd, 5th. So that Texans game, and the Texans have been porous in pass protection. They have a top 10 pressure rate allowed on the year, despite having one of the best offensive linemen in football in Laramie Tunsil and having a guard in Shaq Mason, who's not bad. That worries me. Just seeing them constantly be around like 20th or like the mid 20s. I just don't think that pressure rate gets it done if you are consistently rushing 4. Like, if your MO is, hey, we're going to rush 4 and drop 7, your 4 has to get there. And maybe this game against Houston is kind of the impetus for that a little bit. Groot had several really good pressures. Epinesa had some juice. So maybe this starts to kick things forward a little bit, but they're going to see better offensive lines going down the road than what they've seen already. And they've struggled a little bit. And then if you're also pairing that with, being leaky against the run at times, then it starts to give me some cause for concern. We already saw them switch up some run defense stuff against Houston. There were more run blitzes. They were activating Dorian Williams coming forward left and right. So part of me's thinking, do they maybe dial up some more 5-man pressures, maybe some 6? Like, do they combine that with, hey, we've got big physical athletic corners on the outside. We're just going to go press and we're going to jam the hell out of dudes and mug them. And we're going to send 5 and 6
Yep.
and,
Let the
get
pressure get
creative.
there.
Yeah. And kind of see what it does. But I'm kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop of like that pressure or the lack thereof really starting to hurt this defense, given how they like to play structurally.
I was gonna say too, like, and how that complements the offense and a lack of explosive offense. Sometimes you want to make those explosives with your defense and take those shots, take those chances as a defense, and not play so bend but don't break, and actually try to cultivate a turnover, not because of their mistakes, but because of your aggression. And take a page out of the Brian Flores book and try to get your team into a um, positive field position,
Yeah.
and you don't force Joe Brady to, matriculate 80 yards down the field. He only has to go, 40, 30, something
Yeah.
like that. So there is a conversation there to the marriage of defensive identity to offensive identity. And it's not to say that they're not right now. It's just sometimes certain situations might call for a little bit more aggressiveness.
Yeah. And I also would think too, I mean, you could kind of make the case for either side of this argument, but I would have
Yeah.
thought with like the Dolphins game script and the Jags game script being so pass heavy. So I guess maybe you could look at it and be like, well, they threw a ton of passes, so the pressure rate's going to be down. But I also would have thought, given the known quantity of like they're going to be
They
passing
have
every
to pass.
down,
Yeah.
yeah, like that also lets the defensive line tee off and just
Hmm.
kind of play rush angles
Goes
and
both ways.
games. Yeah, so again, you could make the case either way if you really wanted to like negate it or pump it up, but that to me is just in my mind. I'm always rightly or wrongly, and I think a lot of fans are this way too. And you and I have had so many conversations about this. Just they're always investing in the defensive line, like year after year.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's like a free agent on a 1-year deal, or it's a draft pick, or it's significant money. And I just feel like we're still missing like Leonard Floyd from last year right now, where he was this one-man wrecking crew up front. Ed Oliver started to come on, and then they formed like a good 2-man game. I'm just worried about that spot. And then as we go forward, how that ties in schematically. Yeah, it's just something that like I'm kind of like literally every week I'm always like, what's there? Like each subsequent week, I'm like, what was the pressure rate this week? What was the pressure rate? How much did they blitz?
I
What were
mean,
they
to be
doing?
fair, the Von Miller suspension definitely hurts because it's like that he's kind of he's that juice. Like
Yes.
he's the free agent that we got this offseason because it felt like we didn't have him last year. So
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, losing that player is like that's a lot of pass rush productivity that's lost for 4 weeks. So it was
Absolutely.
definitely it was felt as much as they got home
Yeah.
this past week. It definitely felt, especially in the first half, like, oh my god, like we can't influence Stroud
So
at all.
that was my other point from the film. Like the pass rush in the first half was like pretty dead. There wasn't a
Yeah,
lot
it
of
was
pressure.
crazy. Stroud
Yeah.
wasn't moving at all, and like all the plays that Stroud did make in the second half were very impressive from him. He had to move around and really navigate.
Yeah, Smoot was getting pressure. Epinesa was getting pressure. Groot was getting pressure. Like they were doing a good job kind of affecting
Yeah.
the pocket from all angles. But a lot of that again, like came in the second. Groot really started to win inside in the second half. They tried blocking him with the tight end a couple times, which was like, I don't care if it's Cade Stover or Dalton
It
Schultz. Like,
doesn't
why are you
matter.
blocking Greg Rousseau? Yeah, with the tight end, that doesn't work. I wanted to bring up the super chat from Richie. One, Richie, thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much for the super chat. I sincerely appreciate it. Richie says, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Kendall. Richie says, evening, boys. Been getting pushback, but hear me out. If we get hosed by the Jets, McDermott has to be the next one out. He's done a lot, but how many mistakes are too much? Kendall, what are your thoughts on this comment here from Richie? Oh, we all hold on time out. He also says, the guys also made critical, and critical is in all caps, critical mistakes. Should have been in at least one Super Bowl by now. Stop being grateful for breaking the drought. What are your thoughts?
So it's clear where his priorities lie on this. But I think if
And
they
again,
get
that
blown
that's all
out,
real quick. That ties us a little bit to what we talked about earlier, right? Like when does that moment come of like you are grateful for punching your ticket to the dance every year
yeah,
versus being like
yeah,
we haven't been to
yeah,
the
you did bring it up.
finale, like we haven't been to the big ball or won
Right,
it. Like when do you kind of
right.
yeah.
Um, what I'll say is, yeah, if they get blown out, like we really do have to start talking about it. What I will say is I'm really happy to hear him actually take the blame after last game.
Mm.
Um, I feel like a lot of years in recency, a lot of the recent 2, 3 years, when these things have happened, he just kind of says like, "Oh, we didn't
Yeah,
execute,"
it's
and he
been
doesn't.
like very much like coach speak. Like we got to look
Yeah,
at the tape and see
but
what
he
to
was
do.
very humanizing in this past moment where he was just like, "No, I got to take accountability. Like that's my fault. Like got to be better." And it was nice to hear him say that. I know that doesn't really like help anyone feel better about it, but it helped me feel
Yeah.
better about it. It's just it's a different coach speak, so it was nice. It
Yeah.
was refreshing. Um, but if he gets blown out, if the Bills get blown out in this game with an interim head coach, like the questions have to start being asked. You and I talked about the how the Houston game played out, and to me, it doesn't come down to running the football 3 times when you're on your own
Yes.
2 yard line. Like
I know
that's
he
not where the
admitted
game was
like there was
lost.
wrongdoing and everybody's been talking
Yeah,
about it. Yeah, I
there
honestly
were
think the
things
difference was
that
a little negligible. Yeah.
like he could have ran it once and then passed it twice or something like that.
But
But in
also,
my
like, to not to give him a pass, Allen could have also completed some 5 or
yeah,
6 yard completions to guys underneath instead of taking the shots he took each time, especially the
right.
one to Hollins.
I mean, to me personally, like they had to play for a first down there. It
I
was
agree.
like you have to get a first down, and if you do that, you secure overtime. Like you're playing to get into overtime
Yes,
at that point
agreed.
because of the 2 punts prior. Um, so it was just a field position game at that point, and they kind of got screwed with where they were. And I don't love the decision of 3 passes, but I don't hate the idea of being aggressive and just trying to get that first down and
Yeah.
securing overtime. Um, I guess this is a really long-winded way of saying I'm not blaming McDermott so much for this past loss as I think a lot of people are. But I do think that compounded with a big loss to the Jets would go a long way in kind of like turning me over into being like,
Oh, really?
maybe. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Like this is a team that's having some struggles. This is a team that the Bills have struggled with, and they're in a moment of turmoil. Like
Yes.
this is a moment where you should be able to catch them when they're not right and you're motivated to do everything to turn your season around. Like this is a very pivotal moment for the Bills themselves. And if they're not up to the task from a schematic perspective or from a motivating perspective, like at a certain point it does fall back on McDermott. But I'm not going to sit here and be like, if the Bills lose by 14,
Mm,
then he needs to get fired. Like the Bills don't lose by a lot of points very often, and the way they lost to the Ravens, we talked about it, was very one-off-ish. Like the team that they played in the Ravens is a very specific kryptonite
yes.
to the way the Bills are built and the way the Bills are injured, to be honest. Um, so it's really nuanced for me, and I don't want to like cop out and be like that, but it's going to take a very specific type of loss for me to be like, yeah, McDermott needs to be out after losing to the Jets.
Fair. I like this. So Richie came back with another super chat. Again, Richie, I really appreciate you being here and the super chat. This is a cool fun fact. Richie said, fun fact, if the QB coach duo doesn't do it in the first 5 years, it has literally never been done. That's a super cool fun
That
fact.
is
I
cool.
did not know that. I've been trying to think the whole time of
Right.
like
Just trying to go
all the
through it.
Super Bowl winning teams and thinking like and yeah, I guess
No,
that
it can make sense. Like it either clicks or it doesn't.
yeah,
But
I think
I
that's
think
super
I think
interesting.
my pushback on that would be how many of those duos were like offensive head coach, like offensive minded head coach and quarterback. Like
Yeah.
how much is the synergy between those two really catalyzing the team's success because McDermott is really overseeing so much of the defense, less so of the
Fair.
offense. I don't know. Not saying one way is the right way or the other, or trying to even discount this because this is
But no,
really
but
cool
that's a
stat.
hell of a pull. I
Yeah,
really
I
like
like
that.
that.
Like that's super that's a really fun like trivia question of like
Yeah,
how
yeah,
many
yeah.
and then it's like like psych
Oh,
the answer is
0.
actually 0. Yeah, I like that a lot.
No, that's cool.
To go back to anything and I'll just leave this super chat up but to go back to his original question like man, I don't my whole thing with it, right, is the known quantity or lack thereof of whoever comes in and replaces him. I have no I have no issue getting rid of a coach at any point in any shape and time for whatever team, right? That I support or any team in general. But I just don't know. And so Ben Johnson, for example, right? Someone you and I talked about the last time
Mhm.
you were here and on and off the off air, and I know he's been tabbed a whole bunch, or maybe, you love Bobby Slowick and what he's doing, or maybe, I don't know, you're like, no, let's get Steve Spagnuolo, whoever the hell you want, right? There's just no guarantee for me that the next guy who comes in gets them over the hump, whether it's an offensive guy, whether it's a defensive guy. There's just as much of a chance that the next guy gets them a Super Bowl as there is the next guy makes them like 3-14 and they're a dumpster fire. And that's the only thing that like holds me back. And it's not necessarily being like fearful or being okay, I guess, with just keeping the status quo. But I do appreciate, and it's not drought related. It's not because, we watched this team for so long and now they're in the playoffs every year and it feels nice. I do think there is something to be said for winning your division every year or getting to the Final Four every year and having that ticket always punched and giving you the opportunity instead of flaming out a little bit. But again, you're still not winning a Super Bowl and you're not hanging banners for AFC East championship trophies or, getting to the divisional round. So I understand it. And then part of me is also like, yeah, remember like Andy Reid and maybe Andy Reid is like the outlier, but Andy Reid was viewed as like this biggest choke, one of the biggest choke artists as a head coach. He couldn't get it done in Philly with like all the NFC championship appearances. Then he goes to Kansas City and year after year, remember they lost that friggin' wild card game to Marcus Mariota and the Titans. Like everybody was like, this guy sucks. Get him out of here. Philly couldn't wait to jettison him out the door. And the Chiefs, a fun exercise. I don't know how to filter it, but if you ever go on like Chiefs Twitter and go look at all the tweets the year before Mahomes arrived, everybody was like insulting Andy Reid and calling him names and how they wanted him out. And now he's viewed as like one of the greatest head coaches and minds of all time, so on and so forth. For me, so many things just have to go right for a team to win a championship. And this isn't like Bill speak. I would say the same thing regardless. Like, look at the Chiefs are a great example, right? Like Andy Reid, brilliant offensive mind. It's really great that he basically has another head coach running the entire other side of the ball and he doesn't have to do anything. Like Andy Reid walks down the office or walks down the hallway on the way to his office, sipping his coffee, and maybe just pokes his head in the defensive room and is like, hey, Steve, you good this week? And Steve's like, yep. And he's like, okay, see you on the field. And that's it. He doesn't have to do anything. And so many pieces have to align to get you to win a ring, both on and off the field. But I understand the notion, like, and I get it. This sounds so wishy-washy and so on the fence. Like, I really like don't have a vote either way. If the Bills came out and lost like 49-3 against the Jets on Monday, I might start to be like, uh-oh.
That's
like
what I
things are
mean.
kind of
Like
getting
there's
off the rails a
specific
little
things
bit.
that have to happen.
If it's clear that he's lost the team or he's lost the locker room and there's no more buy-in, because I think that plays such a bigger role than people give like that credit for or give that credence. So I know we joke about it all the time with the Bills, like, oh, culture and this and that.
No, that's part of his superpower.
Yes.
It's motivating and cultivating a culture and
And it's
development,
in a lot of
all of
teams,
that
like
stuff.
all those teams that are good year after year. The Steelers under Tomlin, the Ravens under Harbaugh when Ray Lewis and Suggs and Reed were there, the Patriots with Brady and Belichick, and even the Chiefs now. Like those teams that continuously have like winning seasons and are in that dynasty conversation, there is a culture that's established and it comes from the top down. So if it's clear that he's lost that, I'm up for it. I really don't have a horse in the race. Like I want the Bills to win a Super Bowl. I don't know if McDermott can get the Bills a Super Bowl, but I also don't know if the guy that they replace him with can get it. Even if you replaced him with a Super Bowl winning coach, you still don't know if that guy's going to be able to get that job done. There's just so many variables. And so, it's always so tough for me when people are like, oh, do you think they should fire McDermott? I'm always just like, I don't know. Like,
I feel like people
I understand
just
the side
underestimate. I feel like people just underestimate how hard it is to truly win the Super Bowl and how many things have to go right. Like you said, it's almost as hard to do that as it is to get the first overall pick. And sometimes living in that world of like, we're giving ourselves a chance to win the Super Bowl. That's all you can ask for is the chance, because once you get to the playoffs, things just have to keep going right. And he's proved that he can't get things right once he gets there. And that is problematic. And that is cause for concern and cause for termination in a lot of people's minds. But who's to say that one year it doesn't just click?
Yeah,
Like
and
that's the
so
thing. All it takes is 1
it
year
just
where it
takes
clicks.
1 year to change that narrative. And so I want to bring this comment from RJ who says, please stop comparing McDermott to Reed. Reed had 4 straight NFC championship games and a Super Bowl appearance. McDermott got the AFC championship once in a very lucky year. Reed was better than people realize in Philly. That's what we're saying. That's the whole point. Andy Reid was very good in
Yeah.
Philly, and they
It's
wanted to put his
nuanced.
head on a stick.
Yeah.
They
It's
treated
not
him,
just about the results, it's about how
yes,
you got to the spot and yeah, did you fall short of the result of Super Bowl? Sure, but how did you get to that point? And like even to talk about McDermott getting to the AFC Championship in a very lucky year, like let's look at the first 3 games of this season and be like, "Oh, were the Bills lucky for their defense to be shutting people down the way they did in the first 3 games of the season? Or was that coaching and development
Mhm.
to allow all of these backups to come in and play such significant roles and really make significant contributions? I don't want to take anything away from the players, but let's not forget who put them in those positions to either be mentally confident or mentally prepared.
Yeah, and I think that's it's such a huge piece. I don't think there's a right answer either way, but like
No,
the Andy Reid conversation comes up because he was a very successful coach and good coach, and people still wanted him out the door because he couldn't
national
get the one
narrative
thing. Yeah,
national narrative was different because he couldn't get the Super Bowl, but we forget how many things have to go right. So many
absolutely.
former players talk about it. They
Yeah.
always talk about how crazy it is, how many stars align to actually make that thing happen.
Yeah, and I think, and then I like this comment here from Richie, and I think this is where all comes down to, right? It takes 1 year, but Allen's clock is ticking, still in the prime, but ticking. Yeah, you don't want to waste Josh Allen's
For
years and
sure.
so
For
on and
sure.
so forth. But there's so I think even if you just look at like the Chiefs run and the Patriots runs, the Steelers, like all these teams, like you think, and I hate to be this person, right? But like think of all the right bounces that went the Patriots' way for them to get there. Their whole dynasty doesn't start if the Tuck rule is called correctly. Like
Well,
he
let's also think about the bounces that didn't go their way, like the David Tyree catch and stuff like
true.
that. Like
Like there's tons of
crazy stuff
variables
happens to
that can
win
go
Super
either
Bowls.
way. All
Like
these
those
pendulum
Giants
swinging
teams were
moments.
not good, but
No,
they
but they had the
won when
right
it
script.
counted.
And that also goes into too, like the whole matchup conversation.
Yep.
Sometimes you go up against
Playing
the
the right
wrong team,
teams.
yeah, and
Yep.
you get that foil, and you're all, oh crap, we got to face this team, and this doesn't
Yeah.
work because they're built this way and we're not. I just think there's so many variables that there's no guarantee. But I'm fine either way. Like, and I
Right.
think it's a really good thought provoking question, Richie. You got the chat all up in arms, arguing with one another. Kendall
No,
and I are
it's
talking
I
about
mean,
it. But
that's
again,
the
it makes sense
question.
because and I think it ties to the larger question again, like we talked about to lead off the show a little bit. Like, when do you cut that cord?
Yeah.
Like when is enough of your, hey man, we appreciate that we're winning the division and getting in the playoffs every year, but the goal is to win a Super Bowl. We're not getting it. When do we kind of cut that tie? Like I think Sean McDermott has a lot of positives. I also think there's obviously, where there's smoke, there's fire, and
Shortcomings,
there
yeah.
seems to be a lot of smoke to the shortcomings we've talked about. You and I have talked about them a bunch on the show. So I'm
I
always fine
think
either way. Like if you can,
yeah.
if you feel confident as an organization to go find someone else, like cool, I'm with it. If you want Sean McDermott to stay, cool, I'm with it. Like I just think there's so many variables. Yeah, it's just and again, like the ugly McDermott moments are super ugly, which I think is what it's not just like that the Bills have lost or haven't won a Super Bowl.
It's
It's the way
Billsy.
they've lost.
It
Yeah,
feels
and
like drought Billsy, and it's
it's
like, "I
ugly.
thought we were past this," stuff like
Yeah,
that. So, I think for
it's
me,
tough.
yeah, you're so right where it's like, I feel very similarly. I don't have a horse in the race, like, whatever happens,
Yeah.
it does sound like I'm very pro McDermott right now. I think I'm just pro, over 500 football and
Yeah,
being able
fair.
to watch good
Like, and
football.
I wouldn't like
Uh,
if they kept Sean McDermott, I'd be like,
yeah,
okay. If they fired him and were like, hey, we're giving the reins to Ben Johnson, I'd be like, okay, I can get behind that. Although
my
the big
main
one for Ben
thing
Johnson for me is his
yeah,
system isn't how the Bills operate. Like
right.
his system is built for guys like Jared Goff, who is
Yeah,
not Josh Allen. Could he tailor it
100%.
and have it fit Josh Allen? Sure,
Maybe.
but I don't necessarily think it's a like for like.
I think my main thing is if it does happen, I just want it to happen on just terms. I don't want it to
Yeah.
just happen because it's like a lack of patience and it's like you lost in the AFC championship again to the Chiefs. And it's like, well, all right, who is beating Mahomes? Because they've done it 3 straight times and that's the only team that's ever done that. So
Yeah.
I just want the cord to be cut, as we can see here from Kenneth, at the right time for the
Mm.
right reasons.
Mm, yeah, I can see that. And the comment here, it's 13 seconds that sets his resume apart. And I think that's so much of it for everyone, right? It's
Yeah.
not only are you not winning the
It's
Super
how
Bowl.
you're losing.
Yeah,
How
and
you're
see,
getting eliminated.
and see this comment here too. It completely depends on how you lose. Yeah, that's it. You're not losing like, man, what a great game or a slugfest. You're losing in ways that makes everybody go,
Right.
what's he doing?
Yeah.
Why would he do that? What is
Yeah.
happening? And yeah, like I think that's what's putting it in perspective. And it, the way the Texans game ended, kind of giving he's already walking a dangerous line because of 13 seconds. That will follow him
Exactly.
for forever. And anytime he makes the wrong decision, he could get 1% milk instead of 2% at the grocery store. And everyone will be like, see, because he can't make the decisions in the moment. It's always going to come back to those like ugly moments. And there's a multitude of them. So I understand where the conversation comes from, but it's no easy way out. Man, good job, Richie. Well done. Appreciate you for being here. Thank you for the super chats. This is fun. We honestly could have done just the whole episode. Could have just 100%. Could have just been
truthfully, Richie, I didn't have a third point to make, so I'm happy you brought that up. I only had
like
two.
that. This is good from Joe, who says maybe the Bills could fire McDermott and bring in a smart and forward-thinking head coach like Aaron Rodgers.
I feel like Josh would love that, though. He would just love that Aaron Rodgers is his head coach, and he could just chum it up and play golf.
That'd be funny. Oh, and this is a good comment here for a question from Adam saying, does it say something about his mindset in the big moments? I think that's the question, right?
That's
is it
always
something?
The thing.
Is it bad luck or, bad coincidence, or is it
bad process?
Is it the person? Is it bad process? Is it just results happening, but the process is sound? Or
I mean,
is
so
it
many people have
repeat?
looked into like this McDermott stuff of like, oh, what's his decision making in neutral moments versus what's his decision making in like crunch time moments. And he's like, I think someone found that he's rather aggressive in neutral moments. He's like a Dan Campbell in most moments, but then when it's crunch time and it actually matters, he gets super conservative and scared to make the aggressive call that has helped his team get to that spot all year. And it's like, those are the things where it's like, I can understand Bills fans being like, be consistent, be congruent with your mindset that you've been pushing all year that got us here, and then falter and walk it back. Like, feels weird. But
yeah, I also think I brought this comment here from Ross, which I don't want to get us too into it even more, but Ross says blame Bean, crappy wide receiver room. Some comments here about Von Miller, the Knox contract, Elam, Kincaid, Diggs should still be a Bill. He says Bean sucks. My part of that too, of like the McDermott conversation, I'm always wondering like, how much do you lump in Bean?
Yeah.
How much of the roster building is Bean versus how much input does McDermott have?
Yeah.
Like, I always think back to the Bill Parcells
Cole Bishop
line.
pick. The Cole Bishop pick shows us there's a lot of collaboration between those two.
Yes, and so I always think that they're kind of in lockstep with one another with how the team is built. The Bill Parcells line always goes into my head like of like, if I'm cooking the meal, I want to be the one buying the groceries. And how he would like build teams, but that like always goes in my mind like of how much do people put on it, and not just saying like for us, but for people in general, like how much do you heap onto Bean versus heap onto McDermott, or how much are they the same brain? Like, are they like, I want to know of all the moves they've made, or was there ever like which ones were the ones where they didn't see eye to eye? How much does it happen?
Let's look at the linebackers, like moving on from Tremaine Edmonds and deciding to draft Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams and leaning into this matchup linebacker idea. I'm sure that wasn't Brandon Bean's idea. I'm sure that was Sean being like, no, this is the defense. This is how I want to run the defense. And I want, like you said, the groceries to run this defense. So I think you're right. Like if it's one of them, it's both of them.
I want the right groceries for this defense. I want him saying that. Everybody's like, what the hell are you talking about?
You got to finish the metaphor, sir.
Yeah. What are you talking about? What groceries? What are you doing?
Milk doesn't fit on a defense.
Yeah. What are you talking about? Who's the 1% milk on this depth chart? Are you okay, Sean? Yeah. It's a fun conversation, and it's obviously one. Well, it depends on how you define fun, I guess, but I think it's one like it'll continue to happen as long as McDermott is here and as long as this team doesn't win a Super Bowl. And then I also wonder too, tying into that, if McDermott goes, does Bean stay? Like, what does that look like? Because like, and I wonder how people feel about that. Like, if getting rid of McDermott means you also lose Brandon Bean, how willing are you still to do that? Does that change anyone's mind? That's why it's such a fun conversation, because I feel like there's so many offshoots and avenues and tangents and branches.
It's a can of worms.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's and again, all tying to the idea of like, it's risk reward. Do you risk it and think, hey, we can find someone better and it's positive and you get the reward? Or is it too much of a risk and everything kind of the 1% milk is Bishop? Good comment. That's very good. That's very good. So then Riley Moss is the 1% of the Denver Broncos defense.
There you go.
That's fair. Oh, last one from Richie, who says, ask yourself this. Do you trust McDermott in the last drive of a Super Bowl in the fourth quarter? If the answer is no, he needs to inevitably go. Oh, I like how that rhymed. I don't know if you planned that, but I like how it rhymed.
If he's saying defensively, I don't. Like I've gone back and looked at I think it was either like game tied or other team
like leading or something
down by at least a possession or at most 8 points in gotta have it games. Like that drive is just putrid. That defensive drive is just it's not good. Yards per play on those drives are just not good.
I didn't even think of it from a defensive perspective. I thought of if there's a challenge that needs to be made.
Oh.
No, I was just thinking if there's a structural decision that needs to be made.
For what it's worth, I think he's gotten a lot better on the challenges this year with whoever the replay hire is. Yeah. They've gotten a lot better on that this year. I think he's made the right calls. Even the stupid one that really didn't change anything in the Ravens game, it was the right call. It was just meaningless.
Yeah.
Yeah, defensively, not a lot of faith. Offensively, I don't really feel like he has much to do with that other than are we going to go for it on 4th and 3 in a gotta have it moment? I think he's doing it. I don't know.
And I don't trust anyone, so I don't holistically trust anybody. Richie says, sorry, I ruffled feathers, but fun convo. No, this was a tremendous conversation.
It was very compelling. Yeah, you didn't bring it up toxically or anything.
I think it was great. You meant well by it. Also, you put money behind it, which is cool. But no, you meant well by it. It was good, thought-provoking conversation. I also think it honestly fits into the conversation of what to make of this Bills 3-2 start, because I think this season is a very interesting litmus test for this Bills team kind of going forward, knowing, okay, they're trying to reset some things from a salary cap perspective. They're trying to revamp some things schematically and from a personnel perspective and the direction that they're going with. They've had injuries. They have new coaches on both sides of the ball, but especially at all three levels of the defense, so on and so forth. How much does this season go off the rails versus stay on course? How far do they get? How do they look? How do they exit? What happens in December and January? So much of it, I think, starts from this point, given what we've seen in the first 3 weeks, followed up by the next 2, and then that tying in and funneling into the McDermott conversation. I do think it was really kind of not par for the course, but on track with the conversation that we're having here.
Yeah, I think a big thing with this too is just remembering the expectations from the preseason and understanding, like you said, it's a reset year and what the expectations were going into the season. And there's just this small fraction of me that feels like Bean and McDermott had a conversation in the offseason about the reset, and they were like, you know what? This team can still make the playoffs, but it might be smart for us to make this reset, make the playoffs as the second team in the AFC East, not win our division, get an easier schedule in 2025 and be better in 2025 and prosper. And it's not to say we're going to take a step back and totally give up in 2024, because this team is still competitive. It's always going to be competitive with Josh Allen. It's still a very solid roster. But if they do finish second in the AFC East, make the playoffs, make a run, there's a lot of good experience for a lot of these key contributing young players on this team. And then you add more rookies next year and you have an easier schedule in 2025. That might have been the plan, and they might have overperformed early. And then they're like,
crap.
All right, we're doing this. We're doing this thing. That's only a small fraction of me. That's conspiracy theory brain. But I don't know. There's a reason that they took the reset. It's not to give up and tank, but it's to make themselves better in the future.
I wonder, how much of what's the plan this year and what they're okay, this is what 2024 through 2026 looks like, or what the reset was.
Because we know they're long-term thinkers.
Yes, absolutely. They're always thinking 3 seasons ahead. But I think so much of it is going to just, how this season ends.
Yep.
I think, if they win the division, I don't think anyone, from the fan base perspective, is going to care if they get bounced in the wild card or get bounced in the division. But if they make the wild card and they don't win the division, but they go to the AFC Championship or they go to the Super Bowl, it changes like everything.
Mhm.
And so much of it, yeah, there's so many like avenues and variables of the conversation. I think it's fun. And kind of look, and again, I think you're in a similar boat. Like I truly understand like both sides of it. If you're
Yep.
pro McDermott, you want him to stay, cool. If you are anti McDermott and you think he needs to go ASAP, cool. Like I understand both sides of it. I just always think there's no guarantee either way, but I respect the people who are like, no, here's the known quantity. I want to ride with that versus the people who are like, no, I want to risk it, even though we don't know what the next known quantity is going to be. But yeah, it's man, oof. And then yeah, obviously tying that into like Allen and the
Yep.
cap. Oh, people are going into cap conversations and that, and every team has to
It's a
kind of
lot.
reset. Man, there's so much. Good. Thanks for torpedoing the episode, Richie. No, just kidding. This is fantastic. Yeah, that's really good. I don't even want to kind of get my third point in this was just more play action and bootlegs and where are they and why are we not seeing it a ton. I mentioned it a bit earlier. I just think they need more. Only a 10.8% play action rate on the year, which is 28th, 4.5% design rollout rate on the year, which is 29th. Again, like I mentioned earlier, that's heavily influenced by game script. But yeah, I think a lot of the issues for this team right now in terms of other than the fact that Sean McDermott needs to go or doesn't go or
It's
whatever
an
that conversation
absolute
is.
dumpster
Yeah,
fire.
right. So much of the conversation for me is I want to see what they look like as they start to get a little healthier
Mhm.
on the defensive side of the ball. Offense for me really it tied to your first point and my first point. Everything for offense for me really ties or comes down into like one thing. Can they generate explosives or can they start to stretch defenses out? Is there some
Yeah.
semblance of verticality? Or actually, you know what? I shouldn't even say verticality. Can they start to stretch defenses out either
Yeah, any
vertically
direction.
or exactly or horizontally? Can they start
Anywhere.
to win just anywhere? If they can start to win outside that numbers a little bit, or if they can start to win more
Past
50, I
20.
won't even say 20, 15 yards
Yeah.
plus, but yeah, give me 20 plus, give me some more air yard strikes down the field, something to kind of loosen things up because
Yeah.
I like the offensive line. I don't think it's good enough to be the kind of offensive line where we're like, cool, just bring 9 in the box. We're going to mash you and take care of it.
No.
Especially knowing that your two tight ends are Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, who Knox has improved as a blocker, still isn't a mauler. Dalton Kincaid is not there as a blocker. He can function against like safeties and nickels, but you don't want him going up against true box players like big-bodied safeties or linebackers or defensive linemen. So much of it for me offensively, defensively is let's just stem the tide until you can get healthy. Give me Taron Johnson back. Give me Matt Milano in December. Stem the tide. Let's see what happens. Safety, I think, is interesting. Once Rapp is good, is Bishop going back to the bench? What does that kind of
Mhm.
rotation look like? What do you do with Cam Lewis, who has played kind of well, but also had some kind of
Mhm.
vulnerabilities? But a lot of it for the defensive side for me is just can they get healthy and what does that look like once they
Yeah.
are? Defensive or offensively, I should say, everything for me is just can they stretch the defense either horizontally or vertically? Because so much of it stems from that. And I really do think it's all tied to scheme. And Joe Brady, just like we talked about the last time you were here in the preseason, like it's going to be on him to press the right buttons and pull the right levers almost all
Mhm.
the time to make
Yep.
things work. And then Allen has to be on point. The receivers' landmarks and routes have to be on point. Like so many things have to click because you don't have dudes that are just, oh, yeah, that guy's one-on-one. I'm throwing him the ball because he's going to win. I don't care if it's zone, it's man, I'm going to him. Oh, you're going to double cover him? Okay, cool. Now I have a numbers advantage somewhere else. Like that element is lacking in a multitude of ways, and it's not going to go away unless they trade for Amari Cooper or Devontae Adams or whoever else like people are talking about.
Which would be so ironic after where we were sitting before week 4.
Right? Right?
Like
Just
the
like
whole conversation, the whole nation was like, wow, they figured it out. Yeah, spread the ball around, everybody eats. They were right. 2 weeks later, they need Devontae Adams.
yeah, and it's
Just
so
irony.
funny seeing a lot of like I I've criticized Dorsey going back to 2022 in film, in metrics, on Twitter, on shows, all that kind of stuff. But I do think it's funny now that a lot of the things that are happening to the offense and people are yelling at Joe Brady about were things that were also happening under Ken Dorsey. Eh,
It's just what we do as fans. It's just whoever's the figurehead. It's the person that gets the blame, and
Yep, get
you
blanket
hold
blanket blame that guy.
yeah, you hold the title for being responsible for offensive success or failure. So when they fail, it's you. When they succeed, it's you.
Yeah, it's not great, and I feel bad for
No.
Dorsey being in Cleveland now because Deshaun Watson just does not know how to play football. But although like
Yeah.
Dorsey is the OC, it's Kevin Stefanski's offense. Stefanski's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
play
yeah, yeah.
caller, like so he's the one really running the show there.
He's in Mitch Trubisky reset right now, is what Ken
Nice.
Dorsey's in.
Nice. Very nice. Well said. Well said, Mr. Next Gen Ken over here. I like that. I'm gonna change. I'm changing you on my phone to that.
No.
I don't know. I might change it to that.
You're gonna like try to text me, type in Kendall, and nothing.
I am. I'll be like, where the hell is this? What is going on? I'll just be scrolling, trying. I'm like, oh, it's Next Gen Ken. Oh man, I kind of want to, but I kind of don't know. This was a very fun conversation. I know I feel bad because for people who don't know, Kendall put like a whole bunch of slides together. We used some of them. I used some of them and read off them, but I wanted to go through more. But we ended up just having a really fun conversation in a different direction.
Totally fine.
But this was awesome. You were absolutely tremendous, as I knew you would be. Anything you? Oh, we got to stop. We got a super chat from Carl. Thank you for being here, Carl. You've been commenting consistently through the show.
I love this.
Ooh, I figured you would. So appreciate you being here, Carl. Thank you very much for the super chat. And Carl says, "What's up with Mike Edwards? Wasn't he to start?" What are your thoughts?
I don't know, Carl. I'm right there with you, man. I'd pay $50 for someone to answer this question for me. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, why are we signing this guy to do this? Like, look,
Yeah,
I understand you spend the money to like take the chance, and then best man wins when you get into camp. And I understand he got injured and all that stuff, and Wally Pip that. But like, I don't know. Like,
and it isn't a crazy
something?
deal. It's a 1 year,
No.
$3 million deal, a cap hit of 2.8. But if they were to cut him, it's a dead
Like,
cap of 1.6.
what
So
did
it's not like he's
what
here
did-
because of the money.
Did we pay him to tell us Spagnola's secrets? Like,
I'd take it if that was that. I'd take it.
yeah, well, I guess we'll see when we play the
Yeah,
Chiefs.
we'll
But
find
like,
out.
how fruitful is that truly going to be? Like, he's a solid safety. I'd like to see what he can contribute. I understand how much of this defense is predicated on processing, positioning, understanding assignments, and
Yeah.
our two starters going into the season are players that have played in this defense before. So I
Yes.
understand how important that is. But at a certain point, like, there are limitations, and I want to see what other players can do. And I'm glad we got that opportunity with Cole Bishop, but
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what happens when everyone's healthy. I'm also very curious what's up with Mike Edwards, and I guess the same can go with Curtis Samuel and his usage, but you kind of touched on that a little bit, and it's a little more nuanced.
I was gonna say, like, Samuel for me, I think some of it is with his skill set and like who he actually is versus what he is advertised as. But I think the low hanging fruit there is his toe injury isn't one that was going
It
to go
does
away.
feel like it's a thing, yeah.
Yes,
Turf
like
toe
that.
doesn't just go away.
No,
I've had
that
turf
that
toe,
only
it's not
goes
fun.
away if you like just sit up and lay up and don't do anything for like weeks on weeks.
A long time. It takes a long time for
I think
that
it's
to
like
go away.
4 to 6 weeks. It's a multiple week type
Yeah.
thing. So I should have look at it, but I'm not gonna find it. Like it was something that's gonna linger. He's playing on it, so it's definitely not going away. I think that's partly limiting him.
For
The
sure.
safety room in general has always kind of perplexed me this year. Like once they signed Edwards, I assumed
Same.
I thought it would be Edwards and Rapp as the
Yep.
starters.
Same.
Then they drafted Cole Bishop. I didn't think the fit was necessarily like for like. I feel like they liked him in the interview and they liked the traits and the skill set, and they were banking on that just because of how good he was. You and I have talked about it on the show in text. Like I just thought he was so better as like a boxer, an apex safety, blitzing off the edge.
We've seen it.
From the
When he
side.
buzzes down, he looks good.
So comfortable. And that doesn't mean he can't learn to play more of a traditional safety or deeper.
You can
but
see he's developing quickly, and he's a quick learner,
smart,
very coachable.
Yes. And the athleticism is playing, which is nice. I think his processing is sound, even though he's made a couple mistakes and had some miscommunication
it's going to take time. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like the Rapp and then Edwards and then Hamlin and Bishop. And I didn't really give DeMar Hamlin a shot at starting, although I guess I should have because Edwards was new and Bishop was a rookie. But yeah, I am a little perplexed with this. Just he didn't look great in camp when I saw him in person, but then he got hurt. He was hurt coming into camp already. He missed like a majority of the offseason stuff, and then he tweaked his hammy. I don't know if he's 100% healthy. I do similar to you, like at least once every other day. I'm like, what's going on with Mike Edwards? Even like when I was watching film, I saw him on the sideline holding his helmet. Like I think Benford or somebody made a tackle out of bounds and he like he grabbed their hand and helped him up. And I was like, Mike Edwards. And I was like, damn, where's Mike Edwards? Or like, and even just the safety stuff in general, it takes two to tango, but Claude mentioned in the chat, like no Justin Simmons. Like no
Mhm.
Quandre Diggs, like
Yeah.
this how they've constructed the safety room has been very interesting. And I think it just goes to show what they value is very specific to them. Like
Yep.
what, and they won't move off that. And I kind of understand it. Like McDermott's track record in Philly and Carolina with just making dudes
Yeah.
play very well and raising their floors and ceilings
It's
for
a
not being the
competitive
most.
advantage to
Yeah,
not have to pay at that position
I
because
get it.
I mean, not to say it's like a premium position or anything, but you're saving money. Like the safety market is growing. We saw it with Xavier McKinney, and he is playing very well. So it's only more reason to pay safeties
Yeah.
moving forward. But hey, if you can save money there, it means you can spend elsewhere. And we know Bean likes to spend on the defensive line. So whatever you shave off there, you get to allocate to other places. So
Yeah.
I mean, if you can cut that corner, it makes sense. But right now, it just feels like hey, we made investments in multiple areas for this safety room, and we're just kind of going with the known commodities.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is. Like,
That's as a fan though from the outside. Like obviously
fair.
they know the commodities they're working with.
Yes. But I do think there is a lot to be said for how much they value responsibility
Yeah,
and known quantity above like sexiness or flash. Like, and Damar Hamlin, for as much as I think his athleticism is capped, I think he's best suited as
yeah.
like a depth safety than he is an actual starter, but he plays
He's
kind of
adequate. Like,
responsibly. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. You can't really knock him because it's like, yeah, I mean, if he's playing assignment sound football, but he's athletically limited and they value the assignment sound side more, then I,
And
I
that's what
can't
they've
argue
always
with that
done in the
process. I
no,
can't. Yeah,
and that's what they've always done in like even the corner room. It's why Levi Wallace started for
exactly.
years. It's why Dane
Exactly.
Jackson
Someone
was like
talked
okay on
to
this
me at
squad.
work about this. I was like, yeah, I mean, for 8 years now, like that's what the defense has been built on. Assignment sound, being in
Yep.
position, being a good processor. It's never been about athleticism. They took a swing on athleticism with Kyrie Elam. He hasn't made the
I was
starting
just about to
lineup.
say
So
that,
it's
like,
like
sometimes it's not about the traits, like,
so it's like it's how you fit in the defense and what they want from the defense. So I can't really get up in arms about it. But to Carl's point, like I do want to know. Like I'd pay
yeah,
$50 to know what's going on
and
with
and I
Mike
want and I
Edwards.
wanna see my biggest thing with Hamlin is I just don't think he's, like, a plus matchup player anywhere. I
No.
think he's responsible, and he's
Yep.
assignment sound, but
Yep.
I just don't see him, like, making splash plays or this flash type of player. Even the interception, like, against the Jags, cool, good for him. Brian
Just good
Thomas was wide
position
open.
though. Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence just sailed it. Like, Brian Thomas
Exactly.
was
And he
wide
was
open.
just
He just sailed
he
the
was in the
ball.
right spot to make the tackle if the ball was
Yes.
in
But
in
good, so good for him
yeah.
being in the right spot, and which sometimes, the ball finds you when you are in the right
Yep.
spot and you flow the right way, but I just feel like Edwards offers more playmaking ability, even though maybe not a ton. He's not a huge playmaker, but yeah, like, I do wanna know what they have in Mike Edwards, and especially too, like, just like, the non-schematic piece of, like, dude was part of 2 Super Bowl winning defenses. He knows what it's like in these big moments. Not saying that Hamlin doesn't or Hamlin can't perform or Rap can't or Bishop can't or so on. It's like whoever we're talking about in juxtaposition with him.
It's
But
just like you took a swing on the guy and now you're not.
yeah,
It's
I
it's
don't know.
strange.
It is weird. Like, yeah, I guess I may be wrong. I guess I just kind of assumed he'd start. Maybe we shouldn't have because it was only a 1 year deal and it wasn't a ton of money. And maybe I mean, he would be right now if they didn't draft Cole Bishop. Like, Edwards
Maybe.
probably would
Yeah.
have been the guy alongside DeMar Hamlin, or I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe he
they
was always an
Or
insurance
you know what?
policy.
Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe Cam Lewis would have moved to safety and they would have put Jamarcus Ingram at the slot instead. Like, now I'm all like, my wheels are always spinning of like, why aren't they playing Mike Edwards and like what's going on? So
I
yeah,
mean, I'm
it's
sure they had 4 or 5 contingency plans.
as
So
they always
I'm
do.
sure
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, I am very interested. Well, nice job. The super chats are firing tonight in terms of
Yeah,
thought
compelling
provoking.
questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Anything else on your mind about this 3-2 start, about where this team is, position, coaching, large scale, small scale, or anything Bills, Jets going forward, or anything in general? The floor is yours before we start to wind down.
I think the main thing for me, like big picture, is I think the Bills caught a lot of teams off guard in the first 3 weeks. I think they caught the NFL off guard in the sense that everyone knew that they weren't going to be the same high-powered offense, but they knew who was leading the charge in 17, and they knew they had to respect 17. And I think it took them 3 weeks to realize, yeah, we still have to respect Josh Allen, but it's not in the same way that we've had to, and we're not gonna be playing as much too high against him. And I think it took the league a little bit of time to realize that, and now that they have, the Bills gotta show something else. They gotta show why Josh Allen needs to be respected still. And it's not like he's shown any reason not to, but Josh Allen is the reason that you took this chance on this wide receiver core and allowing him to elevate everyone else. So, I mean, it's going to take a little bit of time, but that's we're getting to that point where rubber meets the road, and we got to start seeing him elevate those guys on the perimeter, because that's what we paid him to do, and that's why we shipped off Diggs. It's you're shaving money somewhere to put it somewhere else. So this is Josh Allen's time to really make it count. I think you're still on mute.
I am muted. Embarrassing. Terrible. Just Bush League. I'm in a similar boat. Just really from once the first quarter of the season is done, even though we don't really have even quarters now because we have an odd number of games.
I know, I hate that.
Which I absolutely hate. The sample size is available for teams. Teams love to scout in like 4-week sample sizes. Teams start to know who you are and what you are. And so now people are going to counter who you are. Do you have the counters for their counters? That's really what I'm looking at going forward. We've seen, we talked about it a little tonight, and again, we had some slides that we didn't get to, but we've seen an increase, teams throwing more single high at the Bills, cover 1, cover 3, how they're performing against that, how it impacts the run, how it impacts the pass, and all of these pieces kind of coming together. I think Brady knows that. I think they should have anticipated a lot of these issues, knowing how they constructed this team. So now the question becomes, how do they counter the counters going forward? Knowing what they put out on tape thus far. And it now becomes like the we know what you know type of thing. And now the chess match begins, like you talked about earlier. And it becomes, okay, how do you break tendency? How do you show A when you're really setting them up for B? Or now they think you're going to go B. Well, now you're running like Y, and they have no idea that that's coming. And then how do you balance that with not showing too much too early and keeping some of it for, November and December and everything that is the chess match of football that makes it such a fun game. I am interested to see kind of how they start to adjust and what do we see schematically? Can they open up the offense a little bit? What does the defense do from a pressure standpoint? Do we see some more blitzes start to creep in? What does this defense look like once Taron comes back? What does Milano look like once he comes back? Like, how does Dorian keep progressing? What do we see at safety? I think there's so many questions from like a fun perspective, but also from like a scary one. And a lot of it, I think really just comes down to how do they start to adjust based on the adjustments that teams are making to them.
Bingo.
Good times. Kendall, this was fantastic. You were fantastic. The chat was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, they were.
And they were great tonight. I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks, as we start to wind down here. Please, and thank you. If you have not already, please drop a like on this video. I guess some people didn't like what happened because we got 4 downvotes, which is rare. But I mean, emotions are riding high. It's probably because of you. I've never had.
No, it's definitely because of my stuff on McDermott, 100%, or just my face.
I think it's the face.
Yeah,
it's the face.
We really shouldn't count that out at this point.
No, I should have just had you stay off camera. But live and learn. Study the tape. We'll be better.
Yeah, there we go. We're making adjustments for the counter punches.
That's nice. We'll adjust to the adjustments. That's what we'll do. But no, this episode was awesome. Major thank you to you, Kendall, for joining me here in this episode. Thank you very much to the chat, you guys. It was and girls, extremely fun and thought-provoking. Major thank you to Richie for your 2 super chats and for really setting us off on this tangent and really fun conversation. Thank you to Carl. It was very good. Thank you, Carl, to you for being here as you always are, and for your super chat as well, and also putting us in a thought-provoking spot. Appreciate you, Richie. Oh, that's very nice. He said, always a great time, gentlemen. Thank you. No, it was awesome, Richie. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who joined us live on this episode. If you have not already, please drop a like on this video. They are the lifeblood of these streams here on YouTube. So please, whether you're watching live now or watching later, drop a like. If you are watching this on YouTube, turn on notifications for the Disguise Coverage playlist here on YouTube. Subscribe to the Cover One channel. Appreciate you, Carl, in the chat saying looking forward to the Cover One film room. Yes, Eric and I will be in the film room tomorrow breaking down this Bills versus Texans game. If you're listening to this show on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on whatever app or platform you're listening to this show on. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show is. If you thought this show was terrible, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day by making them watch this show. I greatly appreciate you folks and whatever former fashion your support comes in. So thank you very much to everybody. And again, Kendall, thank you very much to you for joining me. This was an absolute blast. I hope you had a blast as well. Just in case people don't know who you are, what you do, where they can find you, floor is yours to kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah, name's Kendall Mirsky, as you should already know, hopefully. But if you don't know, every Friday at about 6:30 Eastern, you can turn on NFL Network and you can see me get about 50 seconds to a minute telling you who
It's
you should
happening all the
start
time now. He's on TV
or
all the
sit.
time.
You should start or sit in fantasy based on some next gen stats. I'm actually on a 4-week heater right now, so hoping, knock on wood, that we don't mess that up. But yeah, about a minute every Friday around 6:30 Eastern, you can turn on NFL Network and you might see my ugly face.
Very nice. Yeah, you're crushing it. It's awesome to see you there. I was pumped the first time, and then like now it just like happens regularly. I'm just like, oh,
Who's
Kendall's
that
on TV
guy?
again. No,
Right.
now I'm just like, oh, he's on TV again. The first time I was like, dude, and now I'm just like, I'm not going to text you anymore. You know you're on TV. It's happening all the time. Yeah, it's super cool to see your track and how you're trending. It's awesome. So yeah, keep doing your thing.
Thanks, man.
We will see. Yeah, of course. We will see you on the TV. Appreciate all the kind words coming into the chat for
Yeah,
both myself
seriously.
and Kendall. They're greatly appreciated. I always think it's corny to pull up kind words for
Nah,
myself and
but
for us, so I'm not going to do
chat
it.
was
But
great today.
yeah, chat was great. We see you folks. We appreciate you. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Enjoy some One Pie Pizza while you're at it. I like to
Oh
pull
yeah.
up at different times. This show, of course, sponsored by One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Treat yourself and your family and friends and loved ones to some delicious One Pie Pizza. They also do catering. They got, I tell you, it's all the time, a bunch of different kinds of mac and cheeses. They really just, everything they make is so good. Homemade blue cheese, cup and jar pepperoni, sweet sauce pie. If you get veggies and stuff, they chop them up evenly and sprinkle it across the whole pie. They named a pizza after the brand, and it is absolutely delicious. It's called the Cover One Allen Goat. It is tremendous. The online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening on. Holiday time also means they start to rev up Toys for Tots. So get yourself some One Pie Pizza. If you bring a toy, usually what they do every year is if you bring a toy, you get one raffle ticket for every toy that you bring, and then you get entered into a raffle. And there's tons of prizes, and they vary. Like sometimes it's just free pizza for a certain amount of time. Sometimes it's like tickets to a Sabres game. Sometimes it's like autographed Bills or Sabres merch. Just a whole bunch of cool sports opportunities and food opportunities. They're very good people making very good food. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Again, all their information can be found on the website, and that link is in the episode show notes here on YouTube and on the podcasting apps and platforms. Thank you to you folks. Thank you very much to Kendall. Again, we hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Don't get too angry as this week progresses. We've got a long time to wait until Monday night against the Jets. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.